الکساندرا بخشی از دوران کودکیش رو با پوری سلطانی گذرانده و میخواد اون چه که از او به یاد داره و آنچه که از اون گرفته برای ما اینجا بازگو کنه. Please come in and share your...
Good evening. The year is 1963. I am 10 years old and live with my brothers John and Mark in a tiny white-painted house in Chelsea, opposite St Luke's Church, whose bells peal every Sunday. Our parents are teachers. Our mother is 39, our father 43. We had been looked after by au pair girls since we were little, and we liked these friendly and foreign incursions into our lives, young European girls barely formed. But in that year, a very different person came to live with us, someone who to our young eyes had maturity and mystery. Pouri must have been in her very early 30s. I thought her beautiful, with her slanting eyes and pale, pale coffee skin. She was like no one I had ever met. Our mother was in those days dramatic and sometimes difficult, but Pouri was her equal and certainly her measure. England was still recovering from the war, and food was as grey as the city we lived in, on top of which our mother was a truly terrible cook. Pouri pushed her out of the kitchen and she took over. Oh, that food, those incredible, exotic Persian dishes. We discovered pistachios and vine leaves and stews and saffron and the rice, that wonderful rice with its crispy top. That rice, to my childhood, is what Madeleines were to Proust's. Pouri wore an embroidered goatskin waistcoat with that strange, sharp smell, which was to return in our lives with the hippie fashion of the Afghan coats. She smoked pale Kent cigarettes and sometimes sat on the floor with her wide skirt hooked over her knees, staring into the distance. Her mysteries were boundless. She had no sense of smell. Imagine, no sense of smell. And she told my brother John that she could feel colours through her fingertips, and she knew the colours of playing cards through her fingertips. She called my little brother Mushkuchulu and sang him a nursery rhyme about a little mouse. She showed us the strange script she wrote and helped John learn the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam for his school. So inspired was he by her, he learnt the first 3 verses off by heart and got a very high mark. He says, her commentary captured my imagination. And with me, she would sit on the end of my bed and tell me stories of her childhood, of Tehran, of Isfahan, of this country far away, with snow-capped mountains and gushing rivers, with blue-tiled mosques, with fountains and minarets. It was a fairy tale land I longed to go to. There were 2 things I loved as a child. I loved to read, and listening to her stories was like reading endless magical books. And I also, like so many young girls, loved ballet. And one day, through her friend Ashraf Naini, she took me to Covent Garden, where we had a box, and where, entranced, I watched Fontaine and Nureyev dance. I couldn't believe my eyes when, as they were taking their bows, Hundreds of roses fell through the air. It was another fairy tale, a dream come true. Our parents bought a house in Suffolk. We travelled in a small car, mother, father, Pouri, the three of us, and all our cats crammed together. The cottage was primitive at first, with a cast iron kitchen range, no bathroom, and a lavatory and a shed. Undaunted, Pouri lit that range and cooked huge, fragrant meals for us all, making an instant home in the bleak Suffolk landscape. And then, after about 2 years, she left us but would visit, until eventually she returned to Iran. And from there, for a while, she sent us packets of pistachios, a little enamel picture of polo players that's still on our mother's wall. And one day, a brown paper parcel arrived addressed to me. Inside was a little embroidered goatskin waistcoat, just my size, especially for me, just like hers. I loved to wear it and to think of her and smell that strange smell again. Then over time, we lost touch, but she was still with us. As my brother John says, Pouri left an exotic and indelible impression on our childhood, which none of us will forget. I felt she was somehow always with me, in my imagination, in my heart. I became a publisher. I published books from all over the world, from Egypt, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and indeed Iran. And I travelled too, often taking my son with me to Morocco, India, Egypt, Yemen, Syria, Jordan, always thinking that one day I would find my way to Iran and to Pouri. We knew, I think through Shusha Guppy, that she worked as a librarian at the National Library in Tehran, and about 16 years ago, my brother Mark, trawling the internet, found an email address for her, and he wrote to her out of the blue, and she replied. And we were joyful to be in touch again. On the 27th of December 2011, she wrote to me and Mark, and here is some of what she wrote. My 5-year stay in England seems to have been a turning point in my life. It now forms a part of my soul and body. What happened that I suddenly found myself in England? It is a long story. To put it in a nutshell, once upon a time, my husband and I were arrested and put in jail for being members of a left-wing party. Then my husband was executed with 9 other friends, and I was released after several months. I was in love with my husband, and the shock made me ill. For 2 years I was in bed. The physicians believed that I should leave the country. I could not. After 4 years I surrendered. In fact, I was sent to London and was supposed to stay for 1 year. I had a very close friend, Badri Assa, Shusha's sister. She and her husband were both close friends of my husband and me, so they fetched me from Heathrow and carried me in their car to their house. Soon I entered a language school and began studying the language from the very beginning. I was supposed to go back to Iran after a year, but then I really hadn't learned much English. My health improved, yet mentally I missed my husband, and I miss him yet. However, I decided to go to the university and read Semitic languages at a doctorate level. A famous scholar friend of mine had advised me to do so because it was needed in my country. I was accepted after an interview and studied those languages of Aramaic, Old Hebrew, and Syriac at the same time. One academic year passed successfully when my brother wrote that he no more could send me money. He himself had had a heart attack and had gone to Germany for treatment. At last, I had to give up the doctorate degree and decided to work and continue my English. I became an au pair, and that was how I came to your house. I did a lot for my people to develop libraries and librarianship in Iran. That is how I still work, and I'm called the mother of librarianship. I think that is enough for now. Each state has a long story. All these I owe to staying in England to improve my English. We had known that Pouri's husband had been killed and felt the sadness that sat alongside her humour and her kindness and sweetness. But to read of these things she had gone through was profoundly moving. I wanted more than ever to visit Iran and to meet her again. And finally, last year, I had the chance. A group of friends were going and I could join them just for 1 week. I emailed Pouri but got no reply. Then the woman who was to lead our trip said she would help me find her. 2 days later, she rang me from Esfahan. I found her, she said, and her niece. But she warned me that Pouri sounded very weak. I immediately dialed the number and spoke to Shifter and then to Pouri. I'm coming, I said. In just 2 weeks I shall see you. On November the 16th, I will be there. I was so excited that after all these years, 50 years, I was going to see Pouri again, and that I would have the chance to tell her how important she had been in my life, how she had affected my imagination. But it was not to be. Shifter wrote just days later that Pouri was in hospital and would not survive. At last, I was going to Iran, but there would be no Pouri. On November the 15th, I arrived in Tehran. The following day, Shifter came to pick me up from my hotel. As we got into the car, she said to me, "Why did you leave it too late?" It was, heartbreakingly, too late to see Pouri. But it was not too late to see those beautiful sights Pouri had described to me as a child, to go to her house in a village at the bottom of a mountain by a river. Not too late to eat that Persian rice again, to hear stories of Pouri's life from those who loved her, and most of all, not too late to meet her wonderful family. I like to feel my new family in Iran.